Welcome to our second Student Success webinar series, a webinar of this season, Mastering Your Study Skills. Today, our wonderful presenters are going to be going over some of the different ways you can go about studying, taking notes, and some of the common pitfalls you might run into. This is going to be super helpful now that school is well underway and finals are starting to loom in the distance. There's a ton of information to go over, so let's go ahead and get started. I am joined today by our resident experts, Sarah Snyder, Jenna Gilio, and Ariel Felan. So without further ado, I'll pass it on over to them.
Thank you, Maxine. My name is Sarah, and as Maxine said, joining me are Jenna and Ariel. Before we jump in, we wanted to do a quick overview of where we are in the series right now. So 2 weeks ago, we had a webinar focused on growing our confidence as writers. If you missed it and you want to catch up, you can find it on YouTube. We'll have those links at the end of the webinar. Today, we're going to be focused on study skills, including note-taking. 2 weeks from today is a webinar on critical thinking and research skills, diving in on how to do those well. And then 2 weeks after that, we're taking a look at academic integrity, plagiarism, and the role that AI plays in those things. So we would love to have you back for those. Be sure to get registered for them. With that started, I lost my place. Give me a moment. I'm going to hand it over to Ariel, who's going to take us through the beginning steps.
All right, so these are some of our objectives for today. We're going to talk about utilizing reading strategies, notes, and graphic organizers. We're going to talk about what you need to know to study and how to study, and discovering tips to drive your own success, and then end with the benefits of study groups. So to get started, let's talk about all the things you need to do before you start studying. To set yourself up for success, there are different considerations you may want to think about before you begin a study session. You'll want to start by making a plan and committing to it. This can look like a lot of different things, such as how long you will study each day, what information you will be focusing on, and what strategies and tools you are going to use to make the most use of your time. Sarah will get into this more when we talk about reviewing and cramming appropriately, but once you've made a plan, commit to it. It's easy to quickly switch gears when you don't see results right away, but it takes about 66 days to form a new habit. If these study habits are new for you, then give yourself some time to develop these good habits and show results. Have a goal in mind of what you want to achieve by the end of your study session or by the end of whatever test, class, or new topic you are trying to master. This will help you determine what steps you need to take along the way and keeps you on track with your plan that you've committed to. Remember, this may take some time, so think about short-term goals you can accomplish for the week and long-term goals that you want to accomplish over the semester or school year. Now it's time to think about your study environment. Take a few seconds and just visualize, what does this space look like around you as you begin studying? Do you envision yourself at the local coffee shop or maybe the local library? Maybe you are in a secluded room in your house. Is there music playing, and what kind of music, or is it completely quiet? Do you have all of your supplies ready at hand? Is your laptop or tablet charged, and is that truly the best tool for this study session? These are just some questions to ask yourself before you set up your study space. Now, be honest with yourself here. So many times we think we are doing ourselves a favor by going somewhere to study, when in reality we are giving ourselves more distractions than a productive workspace. If you're not sure what works best for you, try different strategies, but always self-assess to make sure that where you are choosing to work in is going to help you reach your goals. The biggest consideration you want to make about your environment is whether or not it is truly free from distraction. In today's digital age, you're very likely to have some sort of device with you, whether it's a phone, watch, tablet, or computer. Be mindful of the devices you have and put away the unnecessary ones. The devices that you need for studying, put into airplane mode or do not disturb. Turn off the notifications so you're not interrupted in your study flow. And lastly, reward yourself when you've finished a good session. Whether it's a big or small victory, sometimes having that reward as motivation is just what you need to stick to your plan. I know for me, whenever I had to start studying, I would immediately think about what I had to do after, or I would think about all the things I could be doing instead. To help me protect my study time, I would give myself timed breaks that had many rewards to give me enough time to focus, but also set boundaries for when I needed to return to studying. Then I would have a big reward set aside at the end of my study time. This also is a great time to reflect on where you are at with your goals and make any changes to your study habits before it's too late and that big exam has snuck up on you too soon. Now let's get into reading and note-taking, and let's talk about a few overall tips. One of the hardest things you will probably have to do as a student is read a dry textbook or a text that doesn't pique your interest. Have you ever read a page in a book and you get to the end of the page and you don't remember what you read? Well, these strategies that we are going to go over are going to combat that and give you more time to take notes and review rather than getting stuck reading and rereading the same material over and over again. The first thing you will want to do is preview the material and prepare your notes. When previewing the chapter or passage that you are reading, you'll want to look at how the material is organized. Are there clearly defined chunks that you will be reading? What do the subtitles or headings tell you? What images, tables, or graphs do you see? And what do the captions tell you about those images? Prime your brain to begin thinking about what you'll be reading. Then you'll want to prepare your notes page. We'll take a deeper look at different notes options in just a bit, but start preparing your page to support the kinds of notes that you will be taking. The next step is often skipped, but it helps put context to what's to come. Start by reading the introduction or first couple of paragraphs. Then go to the end and read the summary or the last couple of paragraphs. It will probably not make any sense yet, but it gives your brain an idea of what to look for, which will help you make connections along the way. You may even have more questions, which is great because that leads you to the next step, which is active reading. Many times we've been told to read with a highlighter and to highlight the important information. But let's be honest, you end up looking like this. While there is purpose to highlighting, such as identifying new vocabulary or a new concept, we don't want to overdo it and highlight everything. When we get into reviewing and memorization techniques, all of this highlighted information is not going to help and may cause some anxiety. So let's talk about how you can avoid this and use some active reading strategies to bring a stronger understanding of the material the first time you read it. When you are doing your preview, you probably noticed headings or subtitles. One way to turn your passive reading into active reading is to turn those subtitles into questions. When you begin reading those sections, read with the intention to answer that question. For example, if I'm reading a science passage that includes these subtitles, biological organization, the cell, and organs and organ systems, I might turn those subtitles into questions like, what are the units of life and how are they organized? What is a cell and how does it function? And how are organs classified into different systems? To come up with these questions, remember to ask who, what, where, when, how, and why. And don't be afraid to do a quick scan of this section to help you come up with these questions if you're not sure what's going to be included. Before you dive into reading, it might be helpful to quickly scan for new vocabulary. By doing a quick scan ahead of time, you can define the new word and focus on the connections and concepts surrounding that word when you're reading. One tool that might be helpful when defining new vocabulary is the Frayer model. In this model, you are able to define the word and find characteristics, examples, and non-examples. By taking the extra steps to go beyond the definition, you're able to connect this word to existing knowledge you have, making it easier to recall that word in the future. You may not know all this information before you start reading, and that's okay. Some of this information will come as you read, and so you can fill it out as you go. Lastly, you'll want to chunk your reading into manageable sections. The material may already have clearly defined sections, but if there's not, you'll want to decide how much you want to read at a time so you're able to stay focused and annotate. Annotating helps you comprehend what you're reading, and you won't be stuck reading the same section 3 times. Here you'll see an example of different symbols that you can use to annotate different parts of the material, but use symbols that make the most sense to you. My favorite were always the question mark and the exclamation point, because those were quick references for when I needed to go back and look at something. I also like to put notes in the margin to give the section my own title or short summary, so I knew what that section was about at a quick glance. If you're not able to write in your book, you can always use sticky notes or begin the final stage of the reading process, which is notes and graphic organizers. When you finish one chunk of your reading material, you'll want to start your notes. We're going to show you some different note methods and graphic organizers, but the most important thing you'll want to remember here is to put everything in your own words. This helps you truly internalize what you just read. Pick a method that works best for you, and if you're not sure, try a few out. You might find that you prefer one method for a history class and another for a science class. But before we dive into the different formats, let's discuss the tech versus traditional debate of tablets or notebooks. Research shows that handwritten notes are more effective in learning new material, but is that still true when writing on a tablet? A research study done in 2021 with university students and recent graduates found that handwritten notes in a physical notebook led to more brain activity when recalling information and to improved memory. The fact that you can visualize where something is on a physical page is more effective than recalling where something is on your screen. They also found that those writing notes on paper were 25% quicker than those who use digital technology. The methods we are going to talk about next are primarily handwritten in notebooks, but it is ultimately up to you to decide which study tools work best for you. The first method you can try is color coding your notes. You can try making all of your chapter headings, examples, summaries, and test examples different colors to make them stand out on the page. Let's say your teacher comes right out and says, this is going to be on the test. Then that should be a special color. You can even incorporate your color coding into the annotations that you do while reading and bring that into your notes. You may need to play around with which colors work best for you, but this can be very effective. Next is the 2-column method. This is where you take your specific notes in the right column and use the left column to summarize those key points. When it's time to study, you can cover the right side or fold your paper and just study the left side. The method I prefer is the outline method, but I don't always do all the numbers and letters. I use titles and concepts. I list out bullet points below and indent as I get more specific. I typically write in phrases and use abbreviations to make it quick. Cornell notes are a very effective note-taking strategy for courses that are really difficult and contain a lot of information. You may notice it takes the 2-column method one step further. So how does this look in class or after a reading? In the largest area, you take down information, either from your teacher or your text. When your instructor moves to a new point or you begin reading a new chunk, skip a few lines and keep going. Take a second to look at all the things you could record in this space. For every significant bit of information, you write a Q in the left margin. It can be a question or one really big important concept. You don't explain it, you just write it. Like with 2-column notes, this is what you will use for studying. After class or after you finish reading, you go back and summarize what you learned at the bottom of your notes. Now, when it's time to study, you can cover your notes with a card, leaving the cues exposed. You say the cue out loud, then you say as much as you remember about it. When you have said as much as you can, you move the card and see what you said matches what is written. If you can say it, you note it. Graphic organizers are a great tool to use within your notes, and we're going to go through these 4 options for when would be a good time to use these. The first graphic organizer is probably one that you're pretty familiar with, the Venn diagram. The Venn diagram is great for comparing and contrasting 2 or 3 topics. Concept maps are perfect for showing relationships. These can be as simple or complex as you need them to be, and is a great tool to use beyond your notes, like if you're working on an essay and need to do some brainstorming to start. Flowcharts show the sequence of events or ideas. You've probably used a pretty common one, which is a timeline, but flowcharts can encompass more than a sequence of events. It can include steps in a process, such as how to solve a difficult math problem. Taxonomies are also known as hierarchies and help you categorize and identify relationships, such as noting the chain of command in different types of government. Those are just some graphic organizers, and when you get to the point when you are ready to review your notes, you might take your graphic organizers to the next level and create a mind map. Depending on the subject, this step can be critical. If you draw pictures or maps, you will be more likely to understand the connections between things. Plus, if you're a visual learner, you'll be more likely to remember that picture when you take a test. Taking the extra step to create a mind map helps you connect the main ideas from your notes and gives you an easier starting point when you begin reviewing your material all at once. Okay, so you have your notes and your mind map, but how do you really know if you know the material? You have to assess yourself. One of the biggest mistakes students make is thinking that just reading something is enough. I'm going to hand it over to Sarah now to share how you can take your studying to the next stage beyond your notes.
Thank you, Ariel. Effective notes can make or break a study session. So we're going to move beyond the notes now and look at what our studying looks like once we have our notes in place. The very best way to learn and remember something is going to be repeated exposure. So if we read, take notes, review those notes, make flashcards, Google it, find a video. At the end, when we've seen or processed that information 5 different times in 5 different ways, we're going to have a greater chance of remembering that information later on. Should you do this with every single chapter, every single unit, every single class? Well, no one has time for that. But for difficult information that may be harder to retain, this is how you can best remember what you've learned. Keep in mind that if you take 50 pages of notes, but never look at them, or don't look at them until a couple days before a big test, you and your brain are going to be overwhelmed. Repeated exposure in different modalities spread out over a span of time is an important step to effectively processing and remembering new or difficult material. But how do we know what to focus our study time on? Well, we use the 80-20 rule. Simply put, roughly 20% of what you study actually matters to the outcome of the course. Truly, the majority of your results are based on that 20%. The other 80% is great, but it's not contributing directly to your outcome. Whether they know it or not, they are applying the 80-20 rule to their exams. Due to time constraints, they must prioritize what they test you on. Without a doubt, they are going to do their best to test the most important ideas of the class, which tends to make up about 20% of the material that they taught. So what does that mean for studying? Well, if you knew that 20% of the course content, those things you were directed to read and the things your instructor or professor talked about in class, was going to make up most of the exam you were studying for, what would you want to do? Well, you'd want to spend your time studying that 20% and skip the other 80%, right? To do that, focus on the content discussed in class, noting how long your instructor or professor talks about something. If they just gloss over it, chances are you can too. If they spend 30 minutes on a topic, you should probably know that topic really well come test time. They think it's important enough for that amount of time. As you are listening in class and reading the accompanying text, try to go beyond memorizing what you hear and read. Really understand the material and its context. If you understand something, you will more than likely be able to answer a question about that topic. So we've looked at tools and an approach that will help us remember important things, and we've identified a target for our study. But what should a study session really look like? We're going to focus on what a study session doesn't look like, kind of bust some myths around this, what we might believe to be true about effective study that maybe really isn't. Remember, just because it's popular or common doesn't mean that it's the best way to go about it. Probably one of the most tempting things to do while studying is multitasking. This refers to using your phone, texting, watching TV, checking social media, replying to emails, all those things that distract us. Well, research abounds that shows us that those who multitask suffer because they don't give anything their full attention and therefore give each task just a percentage of what they could have given it if they would have focused on one thing at a time. Multitasking causes trouble organizing our thoughts. It would be okay if you were working on something you knew backwards and forwards, but when it comes to learning, this just doesn't work. When you multitask, you also diminish your ability to filter irrelevant information. When you're multitasking, your filter is more inefficient and less accurate. Multitasking also wastes time. What? Yes, it wastes time. It takes an average of 14 minutes to refocus completely on a task after you've shifted your focus away from it to something else. If you check your phone every 5 minutes, are you really ever refocusing on what you were working on before you went to check your phone? So dedicate your study time to studying. Put away the phone, turn off the TV, close out your email. It should be you, your textbook, and your notes, or other supplementary materials. Here's another thing studying should not be: an all-nighter. I've personally never been able to pull off an all-nighter, no matter how much I wish that I could. But students have been using this exam study approach for decades. So does it really work? Well, studies show that a lack of sleep has wide-ranging effects, from blood sugar to immune function to metabolism to lack of focus. An all-nighter is very hard on your body. It wears you down, it exhausts you, and it makes you more susceptible to getting sick. Frequent all-nighters also contribute to the development of poor nutritional habits. When you pull an all-nighter, you are more likely to eat junk food to keep yourself awake and alert. Something's got to keep you going, right? But your palate can become accustomed to such foods, such that your body begins to demand the same through your cravings, even outside of your all-nighter sessions. So be careful what you eat, even while you're studying. You should always take tests on a good night's sleep and without an empty stomach. So cramming all night before a test and skipping breakfast, bad ideas. Some researchers say that it takes days to recover from lost sleep. Others say you never really recover at all. The point is, you're not doing yourself any favors by pulling an all-nighter. Instead, you should plan out your study schedule ahead of time, giving yourself plenty of time to study over a matter of days or even weeks before a test, rather than waiting until the night before, and plan healthy, brain-energizing snacks like apples and carrots for your study sessions. Many researchers and professors will say that cramming is bad, but let's talk about planned cramming. Planned cramming is a little different. I've found times when cramming was just what I needed. So when is it appropriate to cram and when is it not? Cramming works well for short-term memory. It can be great for a vocabulary test or for one and dones. Those times when you know for a fact that you'll never need to know that information for another class or for the next test. For example, I took a general psychology class in college that was very segmented in the way it was presented. Each section was more or less isolated from the others. I was taking this class as a required elective, not as something I desired to pursue in the future. So on test days, I used to get up super early, cram my notes. I was able to perform well enough in that class that when it was over, it served its purpose. Cramming was effective for me because doing so also freed up my other time to focus on the courses that my major required and that were more engaging or more difficult. There are also some key times when cramming is not effective. For example, when you have another test coming up and it's going to build on the knowledge from this test, you need to be sure you understand so that you aren't cramming twice as much before the next test. You aren't doing yourself any favors here either if you cram before every test and you still have a final cumulative exam coming up. You're going to need to cram an entire semester's worth of material for that final exam, and that's just not feasible. If you need to understand a concept because you're going to have to learn something more that builds on it, then cramming isn't helpful. Cramming is also bad news for essay questions. If you're going to have a test calling for you to write on a topic, they always require a deeper understanding and the ability to synthesize information. If you haven't studied thoroughly and deeply, you're going to bomb those essay questions. Cramming sells your brain short. It needs time to process. You can't give it time to process that new information if you're cramming it all in at the last minute. So if cramming is so typically ineffective, why do people do it? Well, because they procrastinated. Did you know that procrastinators are proven to get lower grades? Those who work ahead will take the time to be creative with their assignments. They'll even run a spell check, maybe have a friend or family member double check their work. But because they are rushing through their work and completing it at the last minute, procrastinators don't get the benefit of walking away, mentally processing their work, and then coming back to it a few hours or a few days later. That downtime is what gives your work its best polish because your brain has a chance to process and gives full comprehension the best chance possible. How can we avoid procrastination? Well, consistency and routine are best. If you schedule out your study time at the same time every day, you will get into a routine. Routine is best, but if you can't study at the same time every day, map it out in your schedule where it does fit. Spend the extra time it takes one day a week, maybe Sundays, maybe another day that works better, to plan out the next 7 days. Identify when your appointments are, your classes are, what your work schedule looks like, the commitments you've made to your friends, the errands you need to run, and where your study time is going to be put. Look ahead at due dates, calculate backward to know when you need to start to give yourself the flexibility and constructive downtime that you need. Why bother with all this planning? Well, to avoid decision fatigue. What is decision fatigue? Well, it is estimated that an average person makes 35,000 decisions each and every day. 35,000. Each time you make a decision, it takes energy away from your brain. As your day progresses, each decision you make decreases your ability to make yet another quality decision. Your brain is getting tired. That means by the end of the day, you may revert to making the easier choice rather than the better choice because you've just plain exhausted your brain with all the decisions you've already made. Each decision you can pre-make for yourself by consciously deciding it or incorporating it into a cluster of habits or putting it into a schedule is one less decision you have to make that day. So whether you can set a regular schedule for every week or you need to build it a week at a time, the key is to pre-make the decision about when to study. Be consistent and hold yourself accountable. If you say you're going to study, you have to hold yourself to it. And remember to be honest with yourself. If you plan to go out to dinner with friends and then go home and study, don't schedule the dinner on your calendar for an hour. You know you won't just eat and talk for an hour and then leave, and then you're going to feel guilty for staying longer. So just be realistic with your schedule up front. Give it enough time for that. Sharing your schedule with your family and friends can also help you with accountability and make it clear to them that your study time is sacred. Now, Jenna, tell us how we can stop leaving our success to chance and take more ownership.
Thank you, Sarah. So when it comes to developing effective study skills, it's really important that you remember that you are the driver of your own success. Personal wellness is a crucial component of productive studying. And Sarah shared with you the benefits of getting a good night's rest before a big test. But how else can you take care of yourself while maintaining good study habits? It's proven that exercise actually increases brain performance. So take breaks during your study time to go for a short walk, or consider going to the gym right before a long study session. If exercise is a motivator for you, use it as a reward after studying. Whatever works best for you, whether it's yoga or jogging or lifting weights, any form of physical stimulation can actually help give you a mental boost. When your brain is tired, it can be difficult to focus for long periods of time. A quick power nap can be an effective way to rejuvenate your brain before a long study session. And research shows that power naps are actually more effective than long naps in helping you feel revived and rested. So set an alarm for 20 to 30 minutes and allow yourself to just rest. It's also important to eat before a study session so that hunger doesn't become a distraction. Sarah alluded to this before, but try to avoid junk like energy drinks and soda that will give you a quick boost, but eventually cause you to crash. And instead opt for healthier snacks that will fuel your brain for longer periods of time. And lastly, one of the best things for your brain is music. Not all types of music are appropriate for studying, though. In fact, you should probably avoid loud music with lyrics that could become distracting. But classical piano music is actually proven to stimulate your brain. So consider playing it quietly in the background to help maintain focus on the task at hand. Creating good study habits can be overwhelming, but the good news is you aren't on your own. So don't be afraid to ask for support from your teacher or professor. If it's intimidating to ask a question during class in front of your peers, try to catch your professor after class or reach out to them via email during their office hours. If you have a TA, they can also be a really helpful resource. And take advantage of the resources at your school or campus. If your school has a study center, check it out. They're likely to have staff who can point you in the right direction or may even offer tutoring services. Or you could also consider joining a study group. Study groups are a great way to hold yourself accountable and enhance your learning. They can be particularly effective for completing big projects, working on presentations, or preparing for tests or final exams. Study groups often create a safe space to discuss confusing concepts and provide an opportunity to compare notes and review content covered during class. Check with your school counselor or advisor to find what study groups exist at your institution. And if there aren't any, consider forming one of your own. If you do decide to form a study group, here are a couple considerations that you may want to keep in mind when creating your group. The first is size. Try to keep your group between 4 and 6 members. This helps maintain focus and keep side conversations to a minimum. Who to include? When forming your study group, you'll want to include those with a common goal, whether that be acing a final or maintaining good grades throughout the duration of a class. Where to meet? Much like solo studying, you'll want to identify a place for your group to meet with minimal distractions. Many school libraries have private rooms that would make for a really awesome study group location. The next consideration is duration. Aim to keep your study group sessions to 2 to 3 hours at a time. This is just long enough for the group to be productive, but not too long that group members experience mental block or get sidetracked with socializing. And finally, when to meet. Once your group is formed, establish a time and place to meet together each week or as often as needed. This way, group members can schedule other obligations and social events around your study time. We've offered a multitude of study strategies and tools to consider today, but ultimately you get to decide what works best for you. So try to be patient. Mastering your study skills can take some time and a lot of trial and error. Be open to trying out new strategies and be honest with yourself about what works and what doesn't. For example, if you're a visual learner, you might lean into color coding and graphic organizers like Ariel shared. If discipline can be a challenge, you might be more successful in the library or in a quiet coffee shop versus in the comfort of your own living room. And get to know yourself and your study habits in order to begin adopting the strategies that best fit your needs as a learner. I'd like to leave you with this quote by Roy T. Bennett, who said, "Believe in yourself. You are braver than you think, more talented than you know, and capable of more than you imagine." So try to stay positive. Thoughts like, "I can't do this," or "I'm going to fail," can lead to increased anxiety and overwhelm. So whenever possible, try replacing these thoughts with positive thoughts or mantras instead. Positive thinking can actually lead to increased self-esteem, motivation, and resilience. If it feels unnatural to speak these kinds of thoughts out loud, you can also write them down. Try writing positive messages like, "I can do this," or "I'm going to do my best," on a sticky note and post it in your favorite study spot. When you're feeling stressed or discouraged, read over it for encouragement. Remember, a little positive thinking goes a long way. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to our host, Maxine, to talk about our upcoming webinars and also open up the floor for questions. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So yes, we do have some upcoming webinars talking about critical thinking and research skills and academic integrity coming up in the next month or so. If you're interested in these, do keep an eye out for our follow-up email that will be sent out. It should include links to register for those webinars. Otherwise, we also have a bunch of socials available. So if you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or any of those social media sites, you'll be able to see when we're going to be hosting other events online. Now, before we get to the questions, which again, if there are any questions, please do let us know. I did want to remind everybody that there is going to be a recording that is sent out as well. So if you missed things, if you joined a little bit late, don't worry, you'll have access to the full presentation. Now, we did get some questions coming in, and one was about earlier on in the presentation, we briefly talked about setting goals and its role in like a successful studying habit. What tips do you have on setting attainable or realistic goals?
Goals in general or goals for a study session? Goals in
Um,
general could take a while
oh
to
yeah,
talk
I can
about.
imagine. I think goals in terms of a study habit or a study schedule.
I think the number one thing to keep in mind is to be realistic with yourself and what you know that you are able to do. Your goals are going to be different from someone else's goals, and your ability to attain a particular goal is going to be different from someone else's ability to attain that goal. You can think about it like any academic goal you would have. Someone might be more able to meet a goal of getting an A in a class than someone else. Their goal might just be to get a B in the class. The question is, what do you really want to get out of it, and how much time and energy do you have available to put into it? So I think it's a lot of self-reflection and reflection on your schedule to figure out what kind of goal is actually attainable. And think about your history with goals too. What goals have you set? What academic goals or study goals have you set that you have attained, and what made them attainable? And what have you not attained, and what got in the way of that? I think that all of those things put together in a reflection session with yourself can help you figure out where you can go and where you want to go. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that helps. And something else that I thought of while you were mentioning that was about a year ago, we did have a whole webinar on goal setting and decision making. that is currently live on our YouTube channel that you can go
Yeah.
there. We have a playlist with all of the YouTube videos. So that's where you can see all of our previous webinar content. So that might be helpful in a situation where you're trying to figure out what goals to set on your own. Um, let's see. Uh, what should I do when a topic is very difficult and you just feel stuck?
I'm happy to take this one, Maxine. And I'll allow Sarah or Ariel to hop in too to share their perspective if they want to. But first of all, I would just say that know that you're not alone. I think that happens to all of us from time to time. Um, I think it's important to kind of step back and take a look at the resources that you have available to you. So whether that's your teacher or professor, or like I shared, sometimes there's like a study location on campus, a study facility on campus that you could visit and get some help there. Yeah, so be aware of the resources that you have available to you, and don't be afraid to try one and see if it works. And then if it doesn't work, to try something else too. I think it can be easy to kind of become overwhelmed whenever we're learning a new topic. But it's important to kind of take advantage of the people that are around you to help, as well as the facilities and the resources that are in place at whatever institution that you are attending.
Thank you. We also kind of got a question talking about consistency and routine, how it was mentioned that that can be key when it comes to a study schedule. What should you start to do when you start to feel yourself burning out of that? And what advice or tips and tricks do you have to kind of keep on that schedule?
I would suggest that if you're feeling burnt out, your schedule may be a little too rigid. If if you feel that you have no freedom in your schedule to deviate from it at all, you are going to experience burnout. So I would suggest building in some more flexibility, some time when you don't have to do anything, or stretching out those times where the example that I gave was, if you want to go out to dinner with your friends, be realistic and set it for 2 hours on your calendar so that you feel freedom to relax during those downtimes. And that's going to be really helpful to rejuvenating mind and body and helping you to prevent burnout.
Thank you. We did get a couple of questions just talking about things we went over a bit earlier. I believe one was on Cornell notes, and the other one was on cramming scenarios and tips or tricks for how to kind of properly cram for different specific scenarios. For those types of questions, we do have a recording that is again going to be sent out in the next couple of days, as well as the slide deck. So you can always review that kind of content because we did go over a couple of those. But Sarah, if you wanted to just quickly talk about kind of where cramming might be useful again.
Sure, yeah, cramming is definitely useful in that short-term memory kinds of things where you only need to know it for a short time to get through something. I used it in my psychology class, like I mentioned, because I knew I wasn't going to need this later on. It was not a part of my course plan, and the course was not built in such a way that I needed to know chapter one in order to be successful with chapter two. Now, cramming is not going to work in a math class. You're going to need to know what happened in chapter one to be successful in chapter two. It works well for those vocabulary things where you're just needing to regurgitate the meanings of words, or like I said, for the short term thing, you just need to get through it. I wouldn't cram in courses that are more important to your college path.
Thank you. And then there was another question that kind of asked about reaching out to classmates or a professor for assistance, but not receiving any. If you aren't getting any assistance from them, you can always try to look towards your institution's tutoring center or something like that, and they might be able to kind of work with you on some of those skills. Um, but let's see if any other questions have come in.
I
Yes,
see one more that I can take a stab at, Maxine,
yeah,
if you
go
want.
for it.
There's a question about building good habits when you have ADHD, and I don't have a lot of experience with this, but I do have two suggestions. The first one is to start small so that you experience success quickly, because I think probably for anybody, setting small enough goals that you can achieve them soon is going to give you that motivation to continue going. My second recommendation is a book that I have read that has been really beneficial. And there's a lot of other resources around this book so that you don't really need to read the whole book, but there's a website devoted to it and shorter snippets from it. But that book is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And some of the things that I mentioned are ideas in that book, like adding your habit to something you already do. That's a great resource for how to take something you already do. We all have habits, right? I have a habit of making my bed every morning. I have a habit of getting dressed in this order or doing my morning routine in this order, and how you can add something into that that you want to build into a habit. Um, Funny one, I don't really know why I started this fully, but I recently did that with walking up the stairs in my house. I added a new element to that, that I air punch my way up the stairs every time I go up the stairs. It just kind of added that little habit, and it helps with my arms and my elbows that have a little bit of frustration with me right now. So, but those would be my suggestions. Start small and look into the resources around the book Atomic Habits.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking that question. It doesn't look like any other questions have come in. Actually, just one more. I'm not sure if you'd be able to answer this, but how much time would you take to study for a regular study time by yourself if you're taking, let's say, 6 credits a semester? Or how do you find out how much studying you should have to do?
That's a good question. The general rule of thumb for study time, or for course related time, which would include class time and study time, is that 6 credits a semester would be 6 hours a week outside of class. That can give you a target. If you're finding that that is not enough or is too much, then you can adjust accordingly, but that might be a good place to start.
Awesome. Thank you. And then one last question. What is the best way to get back in the groove? Is it to take a break from all devices, go on a walk? Any recommendations for that?
Jenna, do you want to take that one with the more wellness approach?
Yeah, I totally can. Unfortunately, I think this may depend on the person. For me personally, I can say that exercise is a motivator for me. And so I know you mentioned like taking a break and going on a walk, things like that. I think it's knowing personally what for you is your motivator. And then, of course, helping yourself out by eliminating those distractions. So whether that be your phone, or if you have a loud room in your house, maybe spending time in a quieter space. So I would say my best advice to you would just be aware of how you study best, and do your best to create an environment around you that is going to help you succeed.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah, Ariel, Jenna, for the fantastic information. And thank you, everybody that joined us today. I did see one more question saying that somebody wasn't able to join for the full time. Again, a slide deck and a recording is going to be available in the coming days. So just keep an eye out for an email from us with that information. Um, but yeah, thank you all so much. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.